I smoothed the wrinkles on my silk evening gown and took a deep breath. Tonight's celebration dinner at the country club was supposed to be a joyous occasion, marking my husband Martin's retirement after decades at the helm of Reese Industries. Little did I know it would become the stage for one of the most shocking betrayals of my life. As we clinked champagne glasses with the board members and their spouses, Martin cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he declared, his eyes flickering toward a young woman at the other end of the table. My heart sank as I recognized Ava Carter, one of the junior marketing executives. The way Martin looked at her made my stomach churn. "Lillian and I have decided to get divorced," Martin continued, his voice unwavering. "I've fallen in love with someone else, and we plan to marry soon." A hush fell over the table as gasps and murmurs erupted. I felt all eyes boring into me, waiting for my reaction. Tears stunned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You coward," I spat at Martin, my voice trembling with fury. "How dare you blindside me like this?" "I'm sorry, Lillian," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But I've made up my mind. Ava understands me in a way you never could." Ava shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks flushed. I shot her a withering glare, wondering how this naive girl could be so foolish. As the dinner descended into chaos, I excused myself, desperate for air. Out on the terrace, I leaned against the railing, trying to steady my breathing. Anger and humiliation washed over me in waves. Martin had been my whole world for over 30 years. We built Reese Industries together from the ground up, sacrificing countless nights and weekends. And this was how he repaid me, by casting me aside for someone half my age. I wiped away a stray tear, my jaw clenched with determination. If Martin thought I would go down without a fight, he was sorely mistaken. Game on, I thought grimly. The gloves were coming off. I tossed and turned that night, replaying the horror of Martin's betrayal over and over in my mind. How could the man I'd loved and supported for decades do this to me, to our family? As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I knew I couldn't wallow in misery any longer. If Martin wanted war, then war was what he'd get. I marched into the private bathroom and examined my reflection in the mirror. Though my eyes were puffy from crying, my resolve had never been stronger. I was Lillian Reese, and I would not be the victim here. The first order of business was hiring a bulldog of a divorce attorney. I had my secretary line up meetings with the city's most cutthroat legal eagles. Within a matter of hours, I was sitting across from Jennifer Holder, a ferocious litigator known for devouring wandering husbands. "I want to bleed him dry," I stated bluntly as Jennifer flipped through my financial documents. She arched an immaculately groomed eyebrow. "Even with your substantial assets, a nasty divorce could deplete your net worth considerably." "Money is no object," I said through gritted teeth. "That lying snake is going to pay for what he did to me and my family's legacy." A feral grin spread across Jennifer's razor-sharp features. "Then let's make sure we take him for everything he's worth." Over the next few weeks, I followed Jennifer's guidance to the letter, marshaling every resource at my disposal. Quiet instructions were issued to Reese Industries' accounting department for a full forensic audit under the guise of routine due diligence. Every bank statement, every money transfer, I wanted them combed through with a fine-tooth comb. Jennifer coached me on sowing seeds of doubt among the board members, suggesting personal concerns over Martin's ability to properly steer the company given his emotionally compromised state. A few whispered comments here, a furrowed brow there, and suddenly the company I'd helped build was questioning my husband's leadership. All the while, Martin sauntered around in a loved-up daze, oblivious to the powder keg I was carefully constructing around him. He thought I would simply walk away, that I would be content with whatever crumbs he deemed to toss my way in the divorce. The poor fool had no idea what kind of hell was coming. The forensic audit quickly bore fruit, revealing a tangled web of shady dealings all connected to Martin's desperation to impress his young mistress. Inflated expense reports, kickbacks from vendors, even outright embezzlement. He put Reese Industries' financial health at risk to fund his lavish courtship of Ava. I pored over the damning documents late into the night, my fury growing with each uncovered impropriety. This was the true depth of Martin's deceit. He was willing to sacrifice our life's work, the company we built from nothing, all for a fling with a girl young enough to be his daughter. The next morning, I hand-delivered the audit findings to the board, making sure to linger on the most egregious violations with pointed commentary. "Clearly, Martin's judgment has been clouded by his personal indiscretions," I stated, careful to keep my tone measured despite the storm raging inside me. I shudder to think how much further this rot might have spread if left unchecked. One by one, I watched the concern etching itself onto the board members' faces. Even Martin's most ardent supporters couldn't deny the evidence of his mismanagement and potential criminality. Martin, for his part, seemed stunned by my revelations. The fool actually had the audacity to pull me aside and try to plead ignorance. "Lillian, you have to believe me. I never meant for things to go this far," he blubbered. "I've made some mistakes, sure, but it was all for love." I recoiled from his clammy grasp, disgust written plain across my face. "For love? You jeopardized everything we built together for some cheap fling. I don't even recognize you anymore." As is summoned, Ava appeared in the doorway, her overdone makeup unable to mask the fragility beneath. Martin's eyes immediately locked onto her, his entire stance changing as if their bond transcended the tawdry reality. "Don't worry, my dear," he cooed. "Once the old ball and chain is out of the way, nothing will keep us apart." The naked cruelty in his voice awakened an icy clarity in me. Forget taking him for everything he was worth. This man deserved to lose it all. I crossed the room and stood squarely between Martin and his prize. "Let me make one thing clear to both of you. I am not going anywhere. This company was my lifelong endeavor long before you came along, Ava, and I'll be damned if I let either of you destroy it with your recklessness." Ava opened her mouth, her panicked eyes flicking to Martin for support, but I cut her off with a sharp gesture. "As for you," I turned my withering gaze onto my soon-to-be ex-husband. "I did not survive decades of your insufferable ego just to be discarded in your twilight years. You want to play in the mud with this girl? Be my guest, but I guarantee the only thing awaiting you is regret." Turning on my heel, I left them gaping in my wake, already planning my next salvo. Let them have their fantasy for now. Their world was about to come crashing down. With the audit findings laying bare Martin's misdeeds, I knew I held all the leverage for ensuring a favorable divorce settlement. Still, I intended to twist the knife further before going in for the kill. I requested an emergency meeting with Martin, putting on my best act of contriteness when he arrived. "I've had some time to reflect on things," I began, wringing my hands for effect, "and I realize now how terribly I've behaved." Martin's eyes widened in surprise, and I fought back the urge to sneer at his gullibility. "Really? You're finally coming around." I was just so hurt and angry, I continued, letting my voice quaver with manufactured regret. "But I see now that I can't force you to love me. You found happiness with Ava, and it's not my place to stand in the way of true love." The smug satisfaction oozing from his expression was almost too much to bear. "Well, I'm glad you've come to your senses. This has been difficult enough without your vindictiveness making things worse." I reached across the table and grasped his hand, putting on my best pleading expression. "I only want what's best for you, Martin, which is why you have to end this affair immediately." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What? Why would I do that?" Leaning in, I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "Because I'm afraid Ava has been using you this whole time, taking advantage of your generous nature for her own gain." Martin opened his mouth to protest, but I barreled on with my carefully constructed narrative. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've discovered evidence that she's been having other affairs. Multiple affairs, Martin. She's been bleeding you dry to fund her indiscretions behind your back." His face cycled through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Anger, hurt, disbelief. "No, Ava would never. We love each other." Putting on my most sorrowful expression, I gave his hand a pat. "I'm so sorry, but it's true. The bank records, the money transfers, it's all there in black and white. She's been making a fool of you." Martin's shoulders slumped in defeat. For just an instant, I felt a pang of something, pity perhaps. It quickly passed as I recalled all the anguish he put me through. If it's any consolation, this newfound wisdom has made me realize how deeply I've misjudged you over the years. I lied through my teeth. Why, if I had a partner who showed half the care and steadfast dedication you've displayed, I would consider myself the luckiest woman alive. That seemed to bolster Martin's spirit somewhat as he mumbled a thank you. Men were so easy to manipulate once you mastered their fragile egos. As he lumbered out, I allowed myself a satisfied smile. Between the gaping financial void awaiting him and the carefully planted seeds of doubt about his precious Ava's fidelity, Martin's world was crumbling all around him. Just a few more shoves, and the whole pathetic facade would come crashing down in delicious ruin. With Martin reeling from my revelations about Ava's supposed infidelity, it was time to go for the kill shot. I convened an emergency board meeting, putting on my most solemn expression as the members filed in. I'm afraid I have some deeply troubling news regarding Martin's conduct as CEO. I began once everyone was seated. It pains me to have to do this, but the evidence leaves me no choice. I nodded to my assistant, who distributed the damning audit findings, letting the weight of the financials speak for themselves. Audible gasps and murmurs rippled through the room as they digested the extent of the embezzlement and misappropriation. As you can see, Martin has been systematically looting the company's coffers, all to fund an utterly unacceptable personal relationship, I declared, letting the accusation hang heavy in the air. His judgment has been hopelessly compromised to a degree that constitutes gross dereliction of duty. Walter Grimes, one of the senior board members known for his unshakable ethics, set down the report with a look of profound disappointment. I had my suspicions, given the rumors, but I never imagined the depths of Martin's betrayal. This is a gut punch. Believe me, Walter, I understand your pain all too well, I replied, putting on my most mournful expression. Which is why, as difficult as it is, I feel we have no choice but to relieve Martin of his duties, effective immediately. A chorus of solemn nods rippled through the room. Even those typically loyal to Martin seemed unable to overlook his staggering lapses. Gritting my teeth, I forced out my next words. It truly breaks my heart to say this, but Martin's personal indiscretions appear to have sent him into an emotional tailspin, calling into question his fitness to lead this company. For the good of Reese Industries and our employees, I recommend an indefinite leave of absence on medical grounds while he seeks treatment. The cowed reactions told me they had taken the bait by portraying Martin's ouster as a compassionate intervention rather than a straight termination. I had given them all plausible deniability to avoid feeling complicit in his downfall. As the meeting adjourned with the board's full endorsement, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Everything was falling into place perfectly. The forensics, the sowing of doubts, and now this coup de grace. A part of me felt a flicker of sadness at how far my beloved husband had fallen. But he had chosen to throw away the life we built together through his arrogance and weakness. I merely ensured he suffered the full consequences. My reverie was interrupted by the ping of a new email from Jennifer, my attorney. Pulling up the message, I scanned her concise update and felt a rush of vicious satisfaction. Transfer of assets proceeding as planned. The financial guillotine is primed. Just say the word. I typed a simple reply. Do it. Let the delicious ruination begin. The dominoes began falling into place with ruthless precision. Within days of being forced into a leave of absence, Martin found himself being systematically frozen out of Reese Industries operations. Emails went unanswered, meetings rescheduled, until he was essentially a ghost presence at the company he had once lorded over. I could only imagine the sinking feeling in the pit of his gut as the power he had taken for granted for decades slipped through his fingers. Still, I knew the worst was yet to come for the arrogant fool. Ms. Reese, you have a visitor. My assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. Ava Carter is asking to see you. A cruel smile tugged at my lips as I buzzed her in. The girl's arrival was right on schedule. Ava entered, looking every bit the rabbit caught in the headlights. Though she tried valiantly to maintain her polished composure, I could see the cracks spider-webbing beneath the surface. What can I do for you, dear? I asked in my most saccharine tone as she took a seat. I trust this isn't about your extracurricular activities with Martin. I would simply hate for word of that unpleasantness to spread further. Her eyes went wide with panic. What are you talking about? Oh, I'm sure it's nothing. I waved a perfectly manicured hand in feigned nonchalance. Just that it would be an awful shame if those private investigator reports detailing your numerous other affairs ended up going public. Can you imagine the scandal? Ava paled, and I fought back the urge to cackle at her obvious distress. The phony dossier I had concocted was truly a work of art. But that's not true, she sputtered. Martin and we love each other. It's just us. If you say so, dear, I replied coolly. Though if I were you, I might be more concerned with his mounting legal troubles and the likelihood of financial ruin. That caught her attention, as I'd intended. Leaning forward, I laid it all out for her in brutal clarity. The fraud charges looming over Martin, the asset freezes, the inevitable collapse of his net worth once the divorce was finalized. Do you honestly think a man facing prison time and bankruptcy will have any qualms about leaving you high and dry? I asked with mock sympathy, or that you'll still hold any appeal to him once the thrill of your tawdry affair fades. Ava's porcelain features crumpled as the truth sank in. She was nothing more than a disposable plaything to Martin, shiny arm candy to be cast aside the moment she ceased to be convenient. "You're lying," she whispered. But it was clear she didn't believe her own words. Smiling thinly, I delivered the killing blow. "If I were you, I'd get out while you still can. Cut your losses and find yourself a fresh mark to leech off of. Plenty of rich, desperate fools out there to exploit." A single tear rolled down Ava's cheek as she stared at me in wordless stupor. I gave her a few moments to absorb the reality crashing down around her before delivering the final twist of the knife. "Oh, and one more thing before you go running back to that pathetic creature you've been betting," I added with sugary venom. "I'd strongly advise emptying out any of Martin's personal accounts or assets you have access to. You'll need whatever you can get to restart your entrepreneurial activities." For just an instant, Ava's mask slipped, and I saw the ruthless mercenary parasite lurking underneath. That was all the confirmation I needed that my carefully planted mole had succeeded in guiding her toward the path of maximum damage. Nodding to herself, Ava stood and wiped away the crocodile tears before squaring her shoulders in false bravado. "You're going to regret this," she spat out in a tremulous voice utterly devoid of conviction. I simply laughed as she turned on her heel and stormed out. The delusional girl had no idea how correct she was, but not for the reasons she thought. Once this was all over, the only regret I would feel was not destroying them even sooner. The endgame was finally upon us. Within weeks of Ava's hasty exit, the other shoe dropped with a reverberating thud that shook Martin to his core. I took no small pleasure in being present as the investigator from our corporate security team laid out the damning evidence: bank statements, wire transfers, photos, an entire dossier documenting how Ava had systematically looted over 7 figures from Martin's personal accounts and investment portfolios. She couldn't have," Martin stammered, his face becoming an ashen mask of disbelief. "We were going to start a life together." The investigator simply shrugged, his expression one of practiced neutrality. "I'm afraid the money trail doesn't lie, Mr. Reese. This appears to have been a long-running scheme to bleed you dry." Martin's eyes found mine, pleading for a lifeline amidst the crashing waves of betrayal. "Lillian, you have to believe me. I never thought she was capable of something like this." I crossed my arms, regarding him with a look of utter disdain. "Really, Martin, because it seems to me that poor judgment and self-delusion have become something of a pattern for you lately." His shoulders sagged in defeat as the weight of his situation clearly crushed down upon him. It would have been almost pitiable if he weren't such a despicable creature. "But I don't understand. Why? Why would she do this to me after everything I sacrificed?" He choked out. This time I allowed myself a feral smile. "Isn't it obvious? You were nothing more than a means to an end. A vain, gullible fool ripe for the fleecing by someone younger and prettier who knew just which strings to pull." Martin opened his mouth, no doubt to try and defend his precious Ava's honor, but I silenced him with a raised hand. "Save your breath and what little dignity you have left. This is just the opening act." My smile twisted into something darker. The avalanche was coming, and he was going to lose everything. Over the next several days, the full scope of Martin's ruination began revealing itself. The financial penalties and legal fees started piling up, draining his liquid assets. Forensic auditors identified even more dubious transactions and potential tax avoidance schemes, bringing down the wrath of the IRS. Meanwhile, the revelations of corporate malfeasance I had carefully stoked stripped Martin of every remaining board seat and title position. He went from captaining a billion-dollar empire to a shunned pariah in the span of a month, his legacy crumbling into dust. The killing blow, however, came from an unexpected direction. The gossip rags and society pages that had once fawned over his storybook marriage to me were now tearing him apart. With the collapse of his non-disclosure agreement as part of the divorce proceedings, I carefully fed tantalizing morsels about his affair and accompanying spending benders to key media contacts. Soon tales of poor, used Martin and his gold-digging mistress were splashed across the glossies in salacious detail. A scandal of such delicious karmic proportions was simply too irresistible to avoid, no matter how much old money changed hands to smother it initially. In one final insult, Martin's beloved country club membership was terminated under a cloud of humiliation, the old guard closing ranks around him like a vice. He had become a cautionary tale, something to be shunned and whispered about over chilled Martinez. When he inevitably crawled back to me, begging for clemency and a chance to restore some fragment of his former life, I denied him with icy finality. "This is the bed you made for yourself, Martin," I said, unmoved by his pleas. "I suggest you learn to sleep in it." As he slumped away, broken and discarded, I felt an unfamiliar sensation blossom within me. Not quite happiness, but perhaps a sense of resolution. This chapter of betrayal and trauma was finally closed, allowing me to turn my focus to what lay ahead. The machinations had been brutally unpleasant but a necessary crucible to ensure my complete autonomy moving forward. Never again would I allow anyone or anything to compromise the destiny I had fought so hard for. I was Lillian Reese, newly anointed captain of my own fate, and the world had better be ready for my brand of merciless stewardship. As the ashes settled from the scorched battlefield that was my divorce, I wasted no time in firmly establishing my leadership over Reese Industries. The board meetings that had once been merely a formality were now the arenas where I flexed my hard-won power. Profitability is down over 12% compared to last quarter's projections. I stated in a tone that brooked no argument as I stared down the assembled executives. I want to know why, and I want solutions on my desk within 48 hours. There was a momentary silence as the senior leadership team avoided eye contact, each silently willing one of the others to step into the firing line first. Finally, Stephen, the CFO who had been Martin's loyal foot soldier for years, cleared his throat. The shortfalls can likely be attributed to the recent transition and its attending disruptions, he began, choosing his words carefully, not to mention the lingering PR headaches from, My eyes narrowed dangerously. "You mean the scandal my dearly departed husband created through his reprehensible behavior, the one that jeopardized this entire company's future through his recklessness?" Stephen visibly shrank back, face flushing. "Well, I didn't mean to imply." "Save it," I cut him off with a withering glare. "I don't want to hear any more excuses about factors beyond our control. We make our own destiny here, and anyone unable to adapt to my leadership would be wise to explore other opportunities." The room had gone deathly quiet, the temperature seeming to drop several degrees as the gathered executives finally recognized the new power dynamics at play. This was no longer the Reese Industries of old, where decisions were debated ad nauseum behind closed doors. There would be no more nods to consensus or democratic hand-wringing. My edicts would be final. Mrs. Reese, Maria, the head of operations, ventured after clearing her throat. "If I may be so bold, your decisive vision is a marked change from how we've traditionally operated. I think I speak for everyone when I say an adjustment period will be required before we can realign strategy." A few cautious nods rippled through the table, though most seemed to sense the undercurrent of defiance in Maria's words. My jaw clenched hard enough to crack walnuts. Slowly rising to my feet, I fixed Maria with a look that could blister paint. "Let me make one thing crystal clear for you and your cohorts," I said, my voice like razors scraping steel. "I did not survive decades of being gaslit and undermined by that spineless bastard I called a husband only to face further diminishment from his lackey." Maria shrank back in her seat, all bravado evaporating as I stalked around the table toward her. I could sense the others watching with a mixture of disbelief and morbid fascination. None dared intervene as the new order asserted itself. "This company's oligarchic days are over," I stated, leaning in until Maria was forced to maintain eye contact. "Either acclimate to my leadership and start pulling your weight, or I'll find those better suited to my vision. Am I making myself clear?" She nodded almost imperceptibly, seeming to have momentarily forgotten how to form words. Straightening up, I turned my gaze to encompass the entire cowed assemblage. I did not fight my way through the depths of hell itself just to be undermined again. Reese Industries answers to me now and me alone. My lip curled slightly. "And if that reality is too difficult for any of you to accept, I'd be more than happy to expedite your transition into unemployment." The silence that followed spoke volumes. The machine had a new master, and woe betide anyone foolish enough to forget that. As the meeting disbanded, I allowed myself a tight, predatory smile. This was merely an opening gambit, the first assertion of the ruthlessness that would be required to remake this company in my own image. Pity Martin hadn't possessed even a fraction of my strength, and resolved those final years he frittered away in pursuit of his youthful indulgences. Perhaps then this bloody transition could have been avoided. But in the end, his failures had become my greatest advantage, the forge where my own ferocious independence was smelted, where I emerged hardened, immutable, and finally in complete control of my destiny. I was Lillian Reese, and from this day forward, my name would be synonymous with strength, perseverance, and remorseless ambition. All that remained was for the rest of the world to take heed.